Man, it's
Life.
It's funny about posing. I was hanging out with somebody the other day, and they were saying one of the things that they do. How do I minimize this? And one of the things that they do is they move when they take pictures very slowly, so that it's more candid. Like, and there's more liveliness to the shot. So I thought that was good.
Like they're sneaking up on someone to take a photo, and they're like very slowly, very sinuously.
No, they're the model.
Oh.
Yeah. I started seeing a nutritionist recently, and it's been so cool. Yeah, it gets covered by my company, which is fucking amazing.
So here you have to eat a lot of nuts.
So I basically am gonna try to work on building with her a fully integrated cognitive physio, like physical.
Do they do tests
sports.
on you?
Yeah. Well, I got a bunch of blood tests.
Mm-hmm.
I just got a bunch of blood tests. And
do they
put together like a whole high performance cognitive and like sports and like exercise, diet, lifestyle. What were you gonna say?
Well, yeah, I was just curious how they, profile you, I guess.
I just
figure out what you need.
I was like, I work out this often. This is what I do. This is what I usually eat. But I'm down to change anything in my diet if it's necessary. And then I usually have like however many cheat meals, all that stuff.
Do you feel like having a nutritionist should be like a human right?
It should definitely be a human right. Honestly, I was thinking about. I obsess about the idea of like building my own compound. But I wouldn't want it to just be me. Like, obviously,
a compound, a place for everyone to train together.
But they're train their lives. Train their lives. Like a concentrated environment of like really, really like cool, smart, hardworking people. Like, obviously, it's just basically make a town full of these people.
I don't know why a gym doesn't exist that's like that.
That's fully integrated like that. It should totally though.
It just reminded me of what was it in like Dragon Ball Z or whatever? They would go into that like gravity chamber. Like Vegeta would be in there for because time would move more slowly in there, so you could like train for a year.
Yeah, you train for a year and a day.
But yeah, they should do that. It's kind of an interesting idea in retrospect. I didn't think about the time, but I guess because it's the gravitational distortion in there.
It's the coolest way to do time. It's one of the coolest way to do time skips. Like in anime, there's always a lot of time skips, especially because they sprawl just massive fucking stories. And there's been some cool ways that time skips have happened. Like in One Piece, basically they end up like in this really cool place, and then like the bad guys basically come. And specifically, like, the guy that comes, he's so much more powerful than the rest of the people. But there's another guy who's even more powerful than him. And so he's, like, secretly a good guy. But it's super, and they don't know. The Luffy and his crew, the people that the story's around, they don't know that he's actually a good guy. So they're fighting him, and they're getting their fucking asses kicked. He literally nearly kills all of them. And then he has this ability where he can, like, basically make them fly off to, like, really far away. He can just, like, hit them in such a way that they'll fly off really far. But then the way that they, like, land is also with this ability. They'll be, like, fine and they won't just die. And so they basically all get hurtled, like, thousands of miles away from each other. And then there's like a 2-year time skip or 3-year time skip.
So I'm trying to get back. Continue the battle.
No. The captain of the crew is like, let's all train since we're all apart now.
Uh-huh.
Let's all train for 3 years and we'll meet in a secret location. But it was actually that only the crew knew. But he like did it in a way so that everybody in the world would see. And then they met up 3 years later and they're all super badass.
I love that idea. Yeah. Well, even just the concept of just training. It's so great.
I love training, man.
I feel like in anime or there's such a distinctive, like those kind of like fighting anime. It's like
so that trope
built up as like a trope. Yeah, and I kind of like
I think about I was thinking the other day about like what kind of mindset do you have to be in to write a book, right? Because it's a high performance. Like if you think about it, writers out of what, like, of all the professions or all the like all the types of things that you could do in high performance, I reckon that writing is probably is near the top. And the reason I think that is because if you think about how you have to do it, it's one thing for the book to be good, but what about what you had to do for the book to be good? Like you had to write so much for so fucking long. And then you had to have the right thoughts and you had to like edit things the right way and whatever the fuck.
Yeah, like it's not only a problem of, you got to get into the person's head or whatever it is that you're writing
That's
about.
That's literally the like last thing.
You got to like kind of do it in a way that, you sort of have to become whatever you're writing about like a little bit, just to be able to like have the thoughts. So that's like exhausting.
Right.
But then, you're working on it for so long, the payoff is kind of indefinite and in the future a lot of the time. But I mean, to me, like one of the hardest parts is just like having to sit still for so long. Like you really have to.
You love pacing.
Kind of sit there.
A lot of writers love pacing.
Well, but you wonder what you would, a writer who can sit down. No, that's a benefit.
Yeah, maybe
plant yourself.
They're already in their element. I had the best tea.
Proust never left the bed, so
that's
can't really just drink coffee and eat croissants all day and get really constipated.
Yeah,
I'm not getting out of bed though, because
I'm just gonna write. And was it really good writing?
So they say.
Did you think so?
Yeah, Proust is great.
I will say that there's something to be said of on both accounts,
like,
right? Like I see all these people. I see a lot of people that are like really good with computers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're not in good shape. And I think that I've been thinking about it for so long.
Well, with the
like,
computers,
why?
it sucks you in. Like,
whereas
before,
so what it is, it's not necessarily bad, especially from their point of view, which I'm starting to understand, which is basically like, if you're committed to this lifestyle, you're kind of building something way bigger than you. You're working on something way bigger than you. And so because of that, it's like, do I even really care about like having big biceps, or do I care about like blah, blah, blah? No, I mean, I do. I would argue you should, because it'll improve your functionality. But I think that a lot of them are just like, oh, no. Like, this is my working out. Like, this is how I fucking crunch iron. I just like fucking write code and it's like fucking really good.
Well, it's certainly like.
But that's not everyone, obviously.
Well, it's like a very addictive process, I would say. Computer programming. More than other things, I think. You get sort of obsessed with, there's so many little problems to solve, and they're all kind of like discrete in some ways. There's like always a reason to kind of like keep going. There's always like another little. I mean, sure, when you're writing a story, maybe it's like hard to let it go. You're like, it's like, fiddle with that dialogue over here, da da da. But there's something very, in some ways, like ill-defined, about a story.
Have you ever
piece
lost?
Of art, whereas like computers, it's like.
It's just the show just goes on.
Yeah, it's, because...
The internet ruined it. The internet ruined computer programming.
Well, even in the old days. One of my favorite novels is like, I read this like way back when. It's this author, Ellen Ullman, wrote this book called The Bug.
Bug.
I think it took place in the 90s, and it's just about this computer programmer who just got sucked in. He kind of had like a dead-end job, and he would just like come home and like work on these little artificial life simulations that he was doing on his computer, and it just like became like basically his like escape world, just like constantly thinking about he's just gonna go back home, and his little X's and zeros have been like reproducing all like while he's at work, and like all night, and he goes in to check how the populations are doing, and there's always like another idea, there's always something to add, like it's it's like and you just like the fact that like people talk so much about like connecting their brains to computers or like whatever. Like I feel like ultimately that's just like an expression of that like desire of like human beings to be understood and to have a computer understand them. And so to kind of like justify or balance out like all the time that's like spent with the computer, you know. Like I sometimes I think about that, you know, it's just like when we spend time with a human being, we kind of like expect a kind of like emotional development or kind of like deepening of the relationship. When we interact with the computer, it's like we're having to like kind of play all the roles and stuff.
Not for a while.
So there's like a kind of like a hunger to have the computer like reciprocate emotionally or something like that. Which was brought up in this novel, I guess, in a way, because he's making like artificial
totally
life, you know.
People already have like sex dolls and shit. It's just like,
yeah, well, I mean, but even that like is not even a far cry from what we have right now. I mean, I think that like quite a lot of people have a kind of sexual relationship with their computer, you know. It's like part of the computer addiction itself comes from it's like it's providing you with your sort of like erotic pleasure, with your intellectual pleasure.
I heard 70% of all of the information on the internet is porn. I believe it. I mean,
yeah,
but it's just like, whoa, wow. What will it be in 100 years?
Will they still be looking at porn from that?
That's a really good question. Ooh,
because it does
100 years.
It dates. 100 I mean, it definitely dates because sexual practices date.
I know, right? Like everybody's gonna be like all whole stuff when they're like 15 years old, and then like 2100. It's gonna be fucking ridiculous. They'll be like, that's just like what we do after the school dance, you know. It's like, oh my gosh, like I think about that though because there's the timelessness of it, and then there's the music marks the time, right? At the same time, you got the music, and wow, yeah, this is so indicative of the time period. But especially that music that transcends, it transcends because it has a timeless element to it. And so,
okay,
how much will the wheel be reinvented, like in 100 years' time, when VR is just absolutely? There's no way I can literally describe it right now. I bet you nobody. I don't know if anybody in the world would be able to describe what AR and VR is going to do to our reality in 100 years, not 80 years, basically.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows what could happen? This is like a sort of semi-related thing. Maybe an attempt to like, how could you anticipate such things? A little updating. I think in a podcast previously, we talked about like place cells and grid cells.
Oh, the mice?
Which, yeah, exactly. So there's these mice, and they had these like little electrodes, and it was, hooked up to like one neuron, and you would see where does it fire as the mouse is like wandering around this like little cage. And you notice it only fires when the mouse is in one of these like points. It's on this like hexagonal grid. And so a couple years ago, so people won the Nobel Prize for kind of like working out how these grid cells work. There's a kind of hexagonal lattice that might be rotated or kind of stretched or out of phase. And there's a bunch of neurons. Each one's tied to a hexagonal lattice. And it provides coordinates like some kind of, like a grid is a form of a lattice, but it doesn't have to be rectangular. Just kind of like usually like an even distribution of like points or something.
Okay. It's like a spider web is actually not a lattice because it's not evenly distributed. But a perfect spider web,
in its own terms, it's a lattice. Yeah. Well, so it's then it's yeah. But do you care about the metric?
Yeah.
Like,
does it have to be
the distance between the points?
Yeah. Does it have to be proportionate?
There's a lot of different kinds of lattices.
There's probably heaps of biological ones, so I would imagine.
But anyway, so then there's place cells, which kind of like all the grid cells feed with the place cells, I guess, and they are tuned to like particular places as opposed to these grids. But the kind of coordinate system is made by all these overlapping hexagonal grids. Okay, then there was like all this attempt to like apply that to not just like physical space, so you can understand like how the coordinate system kind of gets anchored when like the creatures enter a particular room or a different space, but then how those maps relate to each other. Like I'm in this room, in Pete's house, in Philadelphia.
That's
whatever.
the danger. Like the danger of it. I mean, in terms of like the potency, it just being so good that it can say, oh, now this mouse is gonna go to this room and go eat that cheese. And it's like, oh no, like now the metadata is here.
Well, it's gonna get worse though, because basically, so then they were like, well, maybe we can imagine like, oh, there's grid cells, blocking out the surface of this mug.
God,
right? It's like not even
terrifying.
And then what about conceptual spaces? So they've done some interesting experiments to just try to show that maybe we map out even like abstract concepts with hexagonal grids. Then they're comparing it with birds. Birds live more in 3 dimensions, they fly around. And they showed that like their grid cells have like a different pattern, like they're more intrinsically like 3-dimensional beings than us. Anyway, there's less to say about it, but I saw a new update to the story on Quanta magazine, which is a great journal of like science and math. And so now they were looking at the effect on the grid cells and the coordinates based on like reward and punishment. And they were able to show that kind of like in a way, kind of like analogous to like general relativity, like, the energy mass kind of like squishes the space like around it, space and time around it. That like, as they rewarded mice or punished mice, like the grid system that they were using to represent space would change so that like stuff would kind of like contract, space would contract near the reward, so it would be like more likely to like go there. So it wasn't just like like our maps aren't neutral. They're actually almost like distorted based on what we think is going to like give us negative or positive
feedback. It makes you think about the simulation theory so much, and just like what level of reality are you in? Are you in base reality where it's you and everybody here in the universe and that's it? Or is it all of that and your life is controlled by other beings of sentience and constitution, which like dwarf yours, like by it's not even able to be described. Because like in the case of mice, this is their reality.
Right.
So it's like, are we really the apex predator? And then like, I wonder, like, then like, what's the point? If that were the case, then like, what's the point, right? Because the mice, at some point, they're like, all I want to do is eat and poop and pee and probably fucking like cuddle, right? Like, what else do rats do?
Maybe. Well, there was a famous rat experiment. I forget. And then someone should look up the details.
They would like ask the humans. They'd be like, "So like, what is all this for?" And they're like, "For art and stuff, and like for science." And they're like, "But does that really matter?" And so then like, what if I were to like be in the room with like the alien that like controls me? And I'm just like, so like, what's the point? And they're like, so we say art and science. They don't even understand what that means, right? So what if the purpose of our lives, they'd be like for this thing, and I can't even understand what that means. You know what I mean? So, like the art and science of the interdimensional being, which controls my reality, and whatever that is basically so complex that I can't, it's whatever it is, I just can't even comprehend it, right?
I mean, I think I look at it like, well, two things. Like one, as regards like simulation hypothesis or like whatever. Like I don't know if it really makes that much sense to. I mean, I'm not saying that like we can't exist, in sort of like layers of simulation, in the sense of like you can have, like run an N64 emulator in a little Linux that's like running on your Mac. Like, there's like a way of like, very common to sort of have one thing simulate another thing. But like in terms of like our relationship to the world, I think it's more like, to the extent that we're able to grasp the world, it's because
Like, everything's already there.
we have it mirrored in ourselves in some way.
Right.
It's like if we're able to like register information about the world and kind of like make distinctions, like those distinctions we have to have made sort of in some ways prior in ourselves, right? Like I wouldn't notice if I didn't have a concept of like a wallet. You might have a wallet. I wouldn't notice. I would be like blind to it only because I can recognize distinction, like a wallet versus not a wallet. Do I even notice that there's a wallet? So, there's what's going on inside us. We make some distinctions, and it's through making those distinctions that we're able to then make distinctions in the world. So of course there's going to be a kind of like mirroring between us and the world, like in that way.
It's like positive discriminating. You have to be so discriminate in your life. Like I was just saying that about when I was on Friday, I was hanging out with my friends, but we were going out, we went to some different places, and just from not the company, because the company was fantastic, but the locations that we went to, it was like I would turn to my right and I would turn to my left, and it was different people, but wearing the same shit, same conversations, and it was just like, man, like I don't and then you go places and you'll like, wow, like this vibe's crazy, like here's this space with all these cool people or whatever, and sometimes it's great. But I was just thinking, because I don't go out very often anymore. When I go out, I definitely go out, but I just don't do it very much anymore, just because it's actually going out and having it like the pinnacle of what it can be might be the best thing that you could possibly do for your entire life, honestly. However, how often can you get there? I go out like maybe like once or twice a month, like seriously, and it's like pretty much legendary like every time. But that's because I go out so little. Okay. And so I'll curate it. You curate the experience, and you're like, oh, I just need to get, like, I want to go to this place because these are the things I actually want to do and like experience, and I want this type of food, and I want these people there, and you get that all matched up, and it's just it's like, well, of course it's going to be legendary time, but that's not how people approach it. They're just like, we'll just go to like XYZ bar, and if that doesn't work, we'll walk to the next one.
Wait, so this is in reference to like having, you sort of have to make certain distinctions in yourself, like before you go out, in order to actually distinguish like the experiences that you want to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's the ultimate discriminator of just be open to whatever the fuck happens, which is probably the biggest one to have, I would argue.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, but that's a paradoxical thing. Noticing an opportunity. Like noticing an opportunity. It's like something unknown or something.
What is it about the glimmer of an opportunity which makes it feel like an opportunity, right? Because we're like, see, like, whoa, look at that shiny diamond. And it's like, okay, like it's refracting the light in such a way because it has like this thing where you're like, wow, yeah, diamond, like valuable, like shiny, ha. And then it's like opportunity. It's like, whoa, like what is the glimmer? Mm-hmm. What is the glimmer of an opportunity? I was talking with somebody in my family recently, and it was so fucking fun because they were like, I was basically saying that everybody needs to understand who they are, and one of the good ways to find that out is like, what are your interests are? And then you obviously are going to like cater your life to that way, right? Because you want to do what you want to do. And some people are able to achieve that more than others. Some people are able to tap into that feeling of that's how they can live their life more than others. And a lot of things go into it, but like optimally, that's what you do, right? So that's sort of like what we're all going toward. We're like all the plants are like pointed toward the sun.
That sort of begs the question about how you know what your interests are, which is often hard.
But so that's true, and that is a prerequisite for that kind of conversation to really happen. It's funny actually because this person in my family was like, they basically were like what I've done with my life, like living in Asia Pacific for like 3 years and like my work in software and stuff. It was like really interesting. I was like confused. They were like, yeah, people like travel all the time, Pete. And they're like, there's like nothing differentiated about your life. And I was like, it was just really interesting because
like there's like lots of people have done that.
Yeah. And I was like, yeah, I would agree. But the people that have done it like me, I only personally know like 10 people. And so it's not to feel special or anything, but it's like, you got to know what you have your hands on as yourself. Like, who the fuck are you? Like, you don't need to just like go to school just because everybody else is doing it. Like, you don't just need to take the advice of what is like probabilistically like the good advice to take, because it might not be what's good for you. Like, it's all based on like who you are. And it's just like really crazy because I'm like, your argument is like I guess I see your point, but it only makes sense from like a zero detail oriented perspective. Because then you're like, okay, like I talk to people and they're like, I love traveling. And I was like, oh, that's great. Like,
right.
And
it,
they're
like,
like,
it leaves
I
out
went-
like what
I
you
went-
actually did.
I
like,
went
what
to
you
Europe
did on
for
the
a
trip,
week,
you
and
know?
I'm like, that's awesome. And I think I haven't been to Europe. I love to go to Europe for a week. But it's just like, there's levels to it, you know. There's levels to skills in basketball and stuff. And you know what, like high performers, like you know where you see high performers, like you see them around other high performers. You know, like it's called like the NBA. That's how it works, right? And so you got to like surround yourself with those people. And sometimes you got to make your own scene. You have to make, because it's something new.
I sense that you're coming around to that. So yeah, like we were talking about, you know, movements and like art and, well, film specifically, because I was talking about how I'd seen this movie Beaches of Agnes, you know, done by Agnes Varda, who just like recently passed away. Who was like
Agnes.
Great lady of cinema. And you know, this movie is in some ways a retrospective or like autobiographical film. It's out there on the beach, bunch of mirrors, and
Whoa,
you know,
it's cool.
is both about cinema and also kind of like weaves together the films that she made, the settings of them, the actors in it, and like you get the sense, and I think this is true of all kind of like art movements, that so much of it is about mythology, like about, you know, before, you know, like you're a great artist and kind of like mythologized by like
You get high with a help
Time magazine or like whatever. It's like, yeah, it's like you have a group of people who are all like, you know, photographing each other, like writing poems to each other, kind of acting in each other's plays. And you know, we were saying it's an interesting thing because it's different from the normal, or like the kind of critical relationship, you might say, where, you know, because it's a little bit different from just sort of like surrounding yourself with like the best, right? Because it's sort of saying like, I got your back, we're mythologizing each other, and even if we aren't perfect now, we're kind of like going to be pushing each other in some way or other, like we're better together than apart. And it's like a time and again, I mean, these, you know, great art movements have arisen, and then, you know, ... like then and then everyone gets in on it.
Yeah, they're like, oh wow,
you know,
that's turned out to be pretty cool after I stopped shitting on it forever. But then how much is that even true? How much are people indifferent to it, and how much is it just they have no frame of reference? I would argue that in my short life, that it's mostly lack of frame of reference. It's not that people are like, fuck all these things, because they're not thinking about them. You know, most people don't. I mean, some people can be negative, unfortunately, but you know, and they might. I guess you might have some colossal list in your head of all these things that occur in the world and how people live their lives, and you're just like, fuck them all. But usually, if you're aware of that many points of view, you're probably not saying fuck them all. It's usually just you say fuck them all whenever you see something new that disorients you in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely part of it. I think, you know, I mean, misunderstanding can be more subtle than that, just like in terms, because there can be like crossed signals, like not merely, you know, like lack of frame of reference, but you could have like an incompatible frame of reference that actually makes you think the person is saying something like completely different from what they're
The
actually saying.
Aztecs brought
like,
Cortez. They're like, oh shit, Cortez, like you're white, like our god was supposed to be white, and so they're like, here, come on in, let's go. It's like just not
one theory, yeah,
it's not gonna work.
Yeah, it's a good example of like many overlaid interpretations, even in real time.
It's like, if you don't want to really die, you better be ready to have an ego death. In some ways. And then in some ways, you know, dying is probably super beneficial. I can't say that Pete has died before, so. But a lot of people have died, so it's probably something that needs to happen. Right. But like, that's...
I don't know, it's tough. It's hard to say anything coherent on it, because it's like...
Nobody's been back.
Yeah,
well, I mean, I guess sort of.
Either like we're supposed to die, or it's just, you know.
Well, you do kind of die
it's because we're, you know, beings who reproduce, you know, sexually, and so, I mean,
we have an aversion to it.
Well, no, I'm saying like if like an amoeba just is budding off, you know, clones of itself, is it immortal? Is it the fact that we're so different in a way from our parents that leads us to a concept of death? Well, the amoeba evolves, you know, in itself over time. It's more slowly. You do it asexually. But, you know, it goes both ways, right? You know, God creates the world, and he's like, I wonder if these assholes can figure out how to become immortal, you know? Or maybe God was like, I wonder if they'll figure out how to make their short, finite lives meaningful, you know what I mean? That's really what's important. It goes both ways. I mean, it's like...
How does the finite capture the infinite?
So true. That's basically...
That's why Matt fucking... He's got his typewriter. I was at an art show on Wednesday, and there was a dude with a typewriter. He would, like, I'll freestyle rap like he could write, like, spontaneous poems.
Yeah, street poems.
You just bust them out, and they're really good. But I mean, that's why Matthew Weiss, you know, he's got his typewriter, he's got his cigarette, and he's just going.
That has happened. It's not completely off base.
It's not farcical. Farcical, is that a word?
Well, it usually means more like kind of funny or silly, or as opposed to factual.
Yeah.
Like a farce.
I really want to get a gemstone, like a big one, like a big rock. Like,
have you been to the gem exhibit in the Smithsonian?
Oh,
I love that. It's really good.
Probably like this big, like that tall.
So I think you can see. I mean, I remember thinking this at the time, that, you know, all the forms of plants and animals are kind of like previewed in the realm of the mineral and inanimate. I mean, you see things that look like animal shapes, fronds, like plants. You see like vine type things. I mean, just the fact that, there's such a great video. I used to show this a lot. It was like Jean Painlevé. It's like this French like naturalist, like documentarian. And he did this movie, a very kind of like trippy movie about like liquid crystals, you know, so like what the displays are made out of. But this was way back in the day.
What, you mean these screens are made out of liquid crystals?
Yes, in some form or another.
That's why they can like.
Yeah, like, so yeah. How do you make a material that you can just command it by little jolts of electricity to like be whatever color you want? And you can see them like in their natural state, just kind of like fluxing and like making images, like, you know, it's like they're not being controlled by anything. It's just like swirling around. It's on YouTube. It's definitely worth looking up. but you could see the way that it looking at, if you didn't know what you were looking at, some parts you'd be like, oh, this looks like a city street or like a natural landscape, but it's just some liquid crystals. So I mean,
Wow.
it's just cool that
Delicious.
like the
Don't eat it though.
it's as if what separates the inanimate from the animate. You might say it's just that,
Just like
the animation. You know what I mean? It's just like the forms are there, but it's a question of like how are they reproducing themselves? It's like a rock versus living tissue.
Gorgeous, dude. I'm thinking about like vast underground caves. Like they've got those like places in like Mexico, where there's like just gigantic like pillars of like giant crystals like jutting through the ground, and they're like 40 feet, like just going.
Wait, like the stalactites and
yeah,
kind of thing. Yeah,
but with like
I've been to
rock.
such things. They're really amazing.
Gorgeous. So
There's
cool.
one in Texas.
It's so awesome.
The underworld.
Yeah, man.
Have you ever thought about like being an explorer of caves? Like I don't even know. It's such a different field now. I wonder how it's changed, in recent years with all
One of my friends from back in the day, Stephen Chu. Shout out to Stephen Chu wherever you are. He was a caver, and he definitely is still a caver. I would imagine he's probably spelunking some really cool shit.
Yeah, I wonder if most spelunkers, if that's one of the things that they know pretty early, like that's what they're going to do. I wonder how many people turn to caving, late in life.
Late in life, caver. I was a late bloomer.
Yeah, late.
But I made up for it. I saw the light. The largest cave in the world, which is in Vietnam, didn't get discovered till sometime in the 2000s.
Wow.
Isn't that ridiculous?
That's pretty cool. Well, I mean, discovered by like.
Well, right. I bet the Viet Cong knew about it. Right?
Yeah, you want
the Viet Cong. They didn't complete their mission if they didn't know the biggest cave in the world was there. They were like cave masters.
What? Wait, you were gonna say something about this? These dollar bills.
So I've got these dollar bills.
Can I bring them over?
Yeah, I'll bring it over. So I got these dollar bills courtesy of my father, and they've been in the family forever. He's just like had them in his house. In our house, right? There's like a bunch of signatures on them, and they're like different. They like don't look like regular dollar bills because they're super old.
Yeah, something.
And basically, the thing is that these dollar bills are from back in the 40s.
What the heck is this?
It's from another country.
Oh, look at that.
It's got a bunch of signatures on it, and he told me over brunch the other day that it was a rite of passage to get one of these, where you would tape a bunch of dollar bills together, and then they would give you this frame. And the military.
Oh.
So what you would do is every time you would go on a plane, you would get signatures from people, because it was like a really big deal to go back on planes back in the 40s.
Mm-hmm.
And the only people in the military that were going to go on planes regularly were going to be officers usually. And so they would carry around these notes together, and they would just get signatures from like all these different people that they would see during these flights. And then when they got to a certain amount of flights that they had done, a certain amount of miles, they would join this club where they would take those dollar bills that you had and they would put them together and be like, now you're in the club. And then they would give you this glass frame, and then they would snort cocaine off of it. It's called a short roller. And I was like, what the fuck? And he's like, yeah, man, like what flights were like super long back then. And he's like, the pilots
are super long back then.
The pilots would to like just keep on going. They would use cocaine, and so this is fun. It's just so funny. Like get to the thing, and then here we go. Now you're really in it. Now you've got your own personal thing you can bring around. So they would bring these around, and they would actually snort cocaine off.
Well, it's a little big to carry around everywhere. You know?
I know.
It's kind of like.
I know. I was like, that's what I was thinking. It's like they definitely need a travel size.
Yeah.
But
so this bill is interesting because it has printed on it like Hawaii, and do you know if that was original to it? Did they used to like?
I don't know. I mean, this one has this weird #1 symbol on it that's not normal. There's apparently a famous singer's name on here somewhere named Bob Hope, and he was a famous singer. He was a comedian.
Bob Hope?
Oh, sorry,
he was a comedian.
He was a singer. He was a comedian. Yeah, he was a famous comedian.
Wow, he signed $1 million.
Yeah, my dad showed me where.
Did he just like received it? Well, how did they know it was like that? How many Bob Hopes are there?
I don't know, but apparently
funny.
my dad. Well, so the reason I have it, and the reason my family has it, is because my great grandfather on my father's side was an admiral. He was the admiral of the Pacific Fleet, the rear admiral of the Pacific Fleet, during World War II. And isn't it so funny? Because
what does that mean?
Well, I would think it's funny because I'm like, I don't get anything from this. Like, there's no continued history. Like, I have my dad and brother and uncle. My dad and uncle, they weren't like now like set for life and like, you know what I mean? Like it's just really interesting. It's just like some dude became admiral. This is my great grandfather, and so he got this because he would go on so many flights.
Mm-hmm.
He'd go on flights all the fucking time, and he met a lot of crazy people. So I guess there's probably a lot of really dope signatures on here, like from other admirals and shit.
Sure. Well, I don't really fully know what an admiral does.
Oh,
let alone a rear admiral.
Okay, so there's 3 types of admirals. So what admiral is the highest position in the Navy?
Okay.
And then it's like general.
Establish that.
It's
first.
like general for the Army.
Okay.
And so there's 3 types of admirals. There's the regular admiral, which is in the middle, and then there's the rear admiral, who's junior to the regular admiral. Mm-hmm. And then there's
so it has nothing to do with like you kind of manning like the rear of like the battle.
The logistics.
Yeah, it's not like that.
No.
Okay.
Like
they go ahead, like you stay behind, like defend, the fortress.
I mean, maybe back in the day, right? Mm-hmm. Way back in the day, when the admiral was like right next to the fucking battle.
Okay.
Or in the battle, and then there's what is it? Admiral General? I don't remember what it is. It's like 5-star. It's 5-star admiral. And so a 5-star admiral, like a 5-star general, can actually only be appointed during times of war. You don't normally have a 5-star general. You don't usually have a 5-star admiral. How it works is the highest position that's an actual position that like goes on in perpetuity in the armed forces is 4-star admiral or general. I'm pretty sure. And then they only go to 5 during times of war when it's like, all right, there's like a couple 4-star admirals, there's a couple 3-star, like whatever. But the ones that are 4-star, like one of them will be chosen as the de facto dude or woman, I guess. Although I don't know if there's ever been a 5-star general or admiral, but that was the woman. That would be an interesting thing to look up. And they would be the person that would make all executive decisions for it. But normally, if it's not times of war, it's not considered as much of a crisis to have one person to do that.
Right.
And so, so it's normally 4.
Cool.
So you might get demoted. You're like, yeah, I was a 5-star general. And it was like, I see in your resume you went back to 4.
I mean, do you get to keep? Do they give you a star?
Yeah. So they give you the thing.
Yeah, I mean,
they probably let you keep the fifth
generally
star,
like
but they probably like
military. But like, I do appreciate like all the little like things.
You don't have to give back the
you know
star.
what I mean? Like,
well, there's
little
the camaraderie
pins and
I think camaraderie is fundamentally, really good if you are doing something fundamentally good.
yeah, right.
I mean, I was thinking outside actually about today. I was like, man, I mean, I respect the hell out of soldiers. There's a lot of different types of soldiers, not just like soldiers in the military. But when I was thinking about the military ones and just like, man, I don't know these people, but basically they're bad. But it's like complex. Like they popped out of vaginas just the same as I did, and then they happened to be in whatever place they were, and then they started speaking the language, and they were surrounded by all these ideas and these things. And sometimes America would fuck them over, probably, well, in some cases definitely, right? And then in some cases they would probably fuck us over, and it's this complicated thing. And then we go to war, and it's like, now with that premise in mind, you got to be down to kill them. It's literally a fight to the death. And it's just really interesting to me because that type of camaraderie is really that, and like what it takes to be that trained, right? Like we were talking about training before. The intense training that like spec ops people do and stuff is so fascinating to me. It's like, in a way, it's like a pinnacle of high performance, but then it's just like, is it the best way to utilize high performance in a lot of ways?
Yeah, well, and camaraderie. It's like how much of it. I mean, it's not to like diminish anyone's experience, but it's like how much of it's like forced on you by like circumstances. I mean, like you're certainly in a place where you need. Like, I mean, I just was thinking about the Peter Jackson movie, like about World War I, and yeah, I mean, like there was definitely like camaraderie, with like the people in the trenches, but but it's like so much comes out of like the shared experience of just like having like shit, like a log over here and just seeing your buddy exploded and like this kind of trauma. And, you can see them afterwards trying to like give, meaning to it. And it's like far be it from me to like contest people's like attempts to give meaning to their lives. But like, I don't know if like camaraderie could be said to be a good reason for getting into it. Although I'm sure that
it's definitely
is a factor. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that is why a lot.
I remember what the last dollar bill was. Actually, it's from New Caledonia, which is in between Australia and New Zealand, and it's where the base was during World War II to fight the Japanese. So after they did island to island hop to get west enough, where they could like send all their stuff through to like New Zealand and Australia unguarded, undeterred. Then they set up on country New Caledonia, and they made their gigantic military base there. I wonder how the New Caledonians felt.
Yeah, totally.
You want to cap it here?
Yeah,
it's probably been an hour.
All right. Well.
Thanks so much, everybody. I hope you're doing well in your lives.
Peace and love. Da-da-da-da. Goodbye.